Good morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. You'll forgive me if I refer to my notes a little bit. Today I want to talk about, I want to ask you a question. How would the world be if we focused on helping others succeed instead of focusing on our own accomplishments? I chose those words, helping someone succeed, rather than making someone succeed, for a very specific reason. Helping is empowering. It sort of presumes that there's something inside someone that you sort of help liberate and free, whereas making someone is sort of controlling. It's stretching, contorting, those kind of things. It's kind of what helicopter parents do, and that's not good for anyone. This isn't necessarily a new idea. Ben Franklin, in trying to live a life of virtue, had two questions he asked himself each and every day. In the morning, he said, "What good shall I do this day?" And in the evening, he said, "What good have I done today?" Certainly helping others to be successful would qualify as a good thing to do. Let's jump in and talk about this from the perspective of leadership. Leadership is a privilege. Not everyone can be one. Some research suggests only 1 in 10 people are capable of being a good leader. If you're fortunate enough to be one of those 10, you can't rest on your laurels. You must become the best leader you can be. I believe that leadership is a skill. It can be honed. It can be nurtured. I think every day you can become a better leader, and I certainly am a different leader today than I was 25 years ago when I started all this. There's a saying, leaders are born, not bred. I don't really like that. Certainly there's some natural leaders, but again, to me it's kind of a cop-out on people not progressing. So I think that people who get behind the, well, leaders are born and not bred, don't always focus on sort of making themselves better each and every day. So I mention this because one of the most important things you can do to help other people be successful is be the best leader you can be. Next thing we need to do is we need to create an environment for people to be successful. First and foremost, we have to establish trust. We've got to connect people with their company vision. Everybody has a different job to do, and we've got to sort of connect the dots for people. I have some folks that work for me. They're called environmental service workers, and they clean and do many duties in the hospital. If you ask one of them what they do and they say, "I mop the floor and I change the sheets," how different is that from another one that you ask and it says, I'm here to save lives. I prevent infection. I help people get better. I prevent hospital-acquired infections. Very different person. It's not even the same job. So how do you get from the first person to the second person? That's the leader's job, to create that. Helping them find their personal mission is one of the best ways you can help people be successful. Have their back. I love this saying. I have two now college, just became an empty nester students, and I find out how old I am because certain things that I say apparently have very different meanings to young people now than they did when I used to say them. And I keep constantly getting shushed and say, "Daddy, you can't say that." But one thing I do think that everybody understands is almost universal. I got your back. I can communicate that clearly. I don't know how to describe it, but you know what it looks like. My kids understand that. My colleagues understand it. Even my 75-year-old father understands that. So have your people's back. Hold people accountable. Some people think that's sort of a bad word. I find that more people, the good performers get very frustrated if a leader doesn't hold the sort of slackers or the less than performers accountable. It's much more, of a complaint than people who think you're sort of too hard as a leader. People, I think, want to be successful. They like to sort of be pushed. They like to strive to achieve. They like to better themselves. And I think it's really important for a leader. And there's a framework that I wish I could take credit for. It's sort of called tight, loose, tight. And what that is the leader typically is responsible for sort of setting, the what. What are we going to accomplish? Then loose is what the empowerment of the staff is about letting them accomplish that. You don't really want to tell them how to do it. You want to let them do it. But then you want to be tight again on the deliverables or the accountability. And when you sort of allow that, people, sometimes they don't, quite succeed the way they'd like. But they had an opportunity to learn. They had an opportunity to do it their way. It wasn't spoon-fed to them. And people really react positively to that, I think. Lastly, strive to be a level 5 leader. Jim Collins in Good to Great talked about the level 5 leader. I've already talked about, not everyone can be a leader. The level 5 is the top of the pyramid. They're characterized by, a humility with a burning passion for the mission or cause, and they're not about ego, but driven to do whatever is necessary to make the company great. Another thing you can do is be a mentor. I've been blessed with many mentors in my life. I'm going to share a couple, sort of tidbits or nuggets that, I've been given. One of my first mentors' name was Steve, and he had a saying, "Act like you own the place and someplace you might." Some people might, misunderstand that. That's not about privilege. That's not about sort of flaunting. What it's really about is organizational stewardship. And I learned that very early on. It's really, really important. Sometimes I frustrate some of my colleagues because, I sort of talk about things that, isn't in my silo because I'm really focused on what's good for the organization. I think we need to be organizational stewards, and Steve, helped me really understand that. I have another mentor named Trish, and she said, would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? And I love this one. I use it almost every day. And part of the reason is because I work with some really, really smart people. And really smart people are sort of used to being right. So sometimes, if you try to win an argument with somebody really smart, you don't always make it work. So I sort of have this sort of saying, and I'm totally comfortable with this. I'm the dumbest guy in the room most of the time. And I'm okay because I play a role on the team. And what that role is, I see things that sometimes those smarter people don't see, and I know how to move the levers to get things done. So when you sort of partner me with some really smart people, and I can sort of help them execute that, because fighting with them, they'll talk about standard deviations, and they'll talk about, erroneous data, and they'll talk about all these things, and they'll narrow the argument so they can be right, and we end up having this principle argument as opposed to what do we really need to do. So I really like that, that quote, and I attribute that to Trish. I think by definition, a mentor has to be alive. The mentee or the mentor needs to be alive. But there's one that I really like that's really helped me, and it's by John Paul Jones. And he said, "He who will not risk cannot win." And what it talks about is being courageous. And we've heard some really courageous stories today already, and I'm sure there's going to be more this afternoon. But we don't talk about courage enough. Everybody wants to play it safe. We're going to be politically correct. I'm not certain how helpful that is. I think being courageous is one of the things that really empowers your team. They know you're sort of, you're willing to take some chances, not be careless, but you're willing to push the envelope. You're willing to make decisions in less than perfect data, and I think people really, really like that. Another thing we need to do to help people be successful is recognize and thank. We can't do too much of that. There's a saying that, you can't have too much money, you can't be too good looking. I can't speak to either one of those because I'm not blessed with either. But I am pretty convinced that you can't give people too much recognition or say thank you too often. One of the other things a leader needs to be is a good teacher. We can do that in a lot of ways. We can stand up in a room full of several hundred people and sort of talk and teach. We can sit around a table with sort of 5 members of your team, or we can just role model great leadership. And all 3 of those things are important. If you can do all 3, even better. But one of the things a good teacher does is give homework. And they also sort of use stories to tell, complicated situations or help people think a little differently. So one of the places where I find the best stories is at TED Talks. So I'm going to share probably throughout this conversation a couple of TED Talks that I found to be particularly helpful. The first one is by Jarek Karaszka, and it's called Why Lunch Ladies Are Heroes. And this is one of the cutest, most powerful TED Talks I've watched. It's about 5 minutes, and he's an illustrator and an author who sort of did a picture book about the role of lunch ladies. And what's fascinating in it, and I don't want to sort of give away all the details because I really do want you to do it as homework, is he talks about the impact that recognition and thank you has on not only one particular person, but a whole group of people. And what he says is, a thank you can change a life. It changes the life of the person who receives it, and it changes the life of the person who expresses it. I'm now going to jump to partnership. Partnership's a little different. Unlike sort of leadership that sort of presumes some sort of positional authority, partnership almost connotes equality by the definition, except we kind of forget that sometimes. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the partnerships I'm involved with and sort of my bias. So my background is in the military service, hospitality, and healthcare. And the common denominator between all 3 of those is 24/7 operations. So I know that sooner or later, on a Saturday night, on a Sunday morning, during the Super Bowl, during the World Series, something's going to happen. And that's not the time I want my partner to sort of say, payback time. I want them to say, oh my gosh, Mike's a great partner. I'm going to be there for him. I think that's really, really important. Construction. One of the other things I do is construction. If I'm not there, I'm pretty close to tipping the $1 billion sort of mark on construction, real estate, and development. And I don't say that to impress you, because if you're in it long enough and you sort of have enough scope, you're going to probably hit that number. But what I think is notable is that during all of that, I've never had a lawsuit around a contractual dispute. And construction, if you've ever been associated with it, or development, or any of those other things, that's not an easy thing to do. And I think it's because of the way I look at partnerships. Some might say, oh, Mike, you're softy, you get taken advantage of. I think if you met anybody that knows me, those are not adjectives that describe me. I think it's more about a focus on sort of win-win and holding people accountable and sort of making sure that we're all connected on the vision and we're tied to each other's mutual success. keys to construction success is you got to have a great architect, you got to have a great construction manager, and you got to have a great owner. I've been blessed with some really great partners over my career. I have this one partner named Kurt. He is a president and a CEO of a multinational architectural firm. I absolutely love working with Kurt. Kurt, is just one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And one of the things I like is I get him personally as part of the team. And he is so humble, and he does not care who has a good idea. He will, if he's meeting one of my customers, if he's meeting one of the people on my team, whoever it is, if they have a great idea about the project, he'll be the first one to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think about that. And then he'll go around and tell people that it was their idea. And this is one of the most successful architects, in the world. No prima donna, no, none of that sort of egocentric stuff. He is about the team, and he's about being, a great partner. I've got another friend, Peter. He is the CEO of a great construction firm. And we did a project. I tell you this because we did this really big project, $300 million project. And if you don't have a good partnership to start with, you're going to be in trouble. And you really got to have all three of those elements. And being a good owner isn't easy. Being a good owner is about making sure you're clear on what you're trying to achieve. And one of the most important things, it may sound silly, but is to be able to make decisions quickly. Something always happens in the middle of a project, and that what drives the architect and the contractor or the construction manager crazy is when the owner can't make a decision. One of the big risks in a construction contract is time. If you don't make timely decisions, you put the whole project at risk. And the longer the project goes, the more likely there's going to be problems. So making great decisions is really important. One of the things, we all built great teams to sort of undertake this project. Certainly the three of us did not, make this project successful. We had great teams. But one of the things that I think was key to our success on the project was that we made a commitment and a pact to each other. We literally looked each other in the eyes, we shook hands, and we said, we all need to agree, and we need to role model this for our folks. If anything keeps you or me or Kurt awake at night, we're going to pick up the phone the next morning, and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to nip it in the bud before it becomes an issue. And our teams knew that, and we never wavered from that. And at the end of 3.5 years of planning, 3 years of construction, we completed this project on time and on budget, and it was one of the most profound things I've ever done, one of the best projects, and the relationships that were forged during this were unbelievably important. One of the other things I get to do is real estate. Real estate's interesting. There's buying real estate and there's leasing real estate. In the real estate transactions that I do, we do a lot of 5-year leases, and we're even doing 10-year leases. That's a long time to make a commitment in this day and age. And if you don't get it right in the beginning, on either side of the partnership, you can sort of be in a world of hurt. You can either pay too much for a long time if you're the owner, and if you're the developer, if you didn't sort of think it through, you can sort of get yourself in trouble. And if the developer feels like you sort of took advantage, they have long memories, and 5 to 10 years is a long time to sort of make it up in other things. So I try to treat every transaction as the continuation of or the beginning of a new relationship. And I've inherited some lousy leases, but so far in the 12 years I've been with my present company, we've done quite a bit of leases, and we haven't really had too much problems. And I think it's because my partners know that I want win-win. So let's talk about the next homework assignment. This is probably my favorite TED Talk of all. This is Ernesto Ciroli, and he's an executive with an Italian NGO, non-government organization, and there's multiple learnings in this one, but I chose it because of the title, Shut Up and Listen. It's one of the most important things when you have a partner is, don't assume anything. No matter how good the motivations are, you have to be sort of open to the possibility that you might not know what's in your partner's head and sort of think it through. So in this TED Talk, he talks about, his experiences doing aid work in Africa. He talks about how to sort of, build an entrepreneurial spirit in a company. But he really talks about sort of how to help people. And he talks about the need to shut up and listen. So let's jump now to followership. Followership is a little bit different. You may not have even heard about it. If you Google it, you won't find anywhere near the hits about followership as you will about leadership. I learned followership at the Naval Academy. One of the first things they teach you before they even talk about leadership is what does it mean to be a good follower? And in the military, there's some pretty clear basics. You need to follow orders. You need to understand what a lawful order is, and you need to know how to follow it. That doesn't really play out in the workplace, but you still want to be a good follower. And I'm just going to talk about it sort of on its most basic, level. And I'm going to talk about it from the standpoint of having your boss's back. How do you be a good follower to your boss? Make him or her look good. It's not about being gratuitous or anything else. It's about how would you want to be treated if you were the boss. if you're new to the organization, talk about the culture. If you see them heading down a path that, there may be some pitfalls because of history or some other things that have happened, share that with them. Make sure they know you've got their back. I've never met a leader who likes surprises. You don't want to burden them with every single thing that you do today or tomorrow or the next day, but certain things sort of raise to the level that a leader probably wants to know about. Shoot him or her a quick email. Let them know when you see them in the hallway. Certain things are sort of real easy. When you're trying to connect people, I work in a relatively large organization, and keeping track of all of our staff is really hard. If you know it's somebody's birthday, if you know somebody just did something great, if you know they just had a child, they just got married, and you can sort of whisper in your boss's ear and say, oh, by the way, if you see so-and-so, congratulate them. They just got married. They just had a child. Their daughter just got accepted to college, whatever it may be. People like that. You would want that from your people. Trying to anticipate. Again, I don't know a leader who doesn't want their team to sort of, feel empowered and do great things, and use that sort of anticipation of what's coming next. How can you sort of get in front of it for your boss and be accountable? Bosses love for people to be accountable. It's one of the blessings that we have. Make sure they understand that you appreciate it, when they do that. Sometimes you have to fight with your boss. I sort of view it as I was hired to do a job, and I bring certain experiences and valuable knowledge to the job. Sometimes my boss doesn't have some of those areas, so it's important for me to sort of help them to be successful and give them the best information. If I see them going down the wrong path, I'm going to tell him or her that. Now, it's always best to sort of do that in private, and at some point, you don't want to sort of continue the fight forever. If they say enough's enough, I got it, Mike, then you need to stop and you sort of salute and you sort of say, okay, we're going to go for it. But I tell every person I interview, every person that I meet and greet when I hire them, and every time I go to company orientation, don't be a yes man or woman. If I'm going to walk off a cliff, I want you to tell me. I want you to say, no, Mike, don't go. I don't need 12 lemmings following me off the side, very happy to sort of have gone to their demise. So let me show you the next homework assignment. This one's by Margaret Heffernan, and it's called Dare to Disagree. And if you work in an organization that's sort of too genteel or favors collaboratism over everything else, and they're really politically correct and they don't like conflict, you need to watch this video. This talks about why it's so important to disagree and what it does for a company. And it's about constructive conflict. It's not about being negative. It's not about being unsupportive. It's about different perspective and actually intentionally looking for people to have different perspective. Some of the work that we do, we sometimes create a position on the team called the contrarian. And their job is to sort of literally poke holes in what everybody else thinks. And it's really fascinating because it really puts a number on the groupthink, and it gets people to think about things a little differently. So you got to watch this video. It's excellent. Now I'm going to jump to relationships. I've tried to be clever over the last 12 or 15 minutes, whatever it's been, about sort of articulating these three unique areas with positional authority and equality and this and that. But the reality is it's all about relationships. When you're in a relationship with somebody, you treat them differently than you treat a stranger. Why not treat every interaction as the continuation of an existing relationship or the beginning of a new one? Don't think about it as a one-off. It makes it so much easier to sort of think about how to really be focused on a win-win scenario. I have one last homework assignment, and this is by David Brooks. And David Brooks is a New York Times columnist and an M.P.A analyst. And he does a TED Talk. It's called, Should You Live for Your Resume or Your Eulogy? And I really like this one because it sort of ties everything that we talked about today together. When you think about what happens with your resume, you list all of your accomplishments. What have I done? What have we done? What have we changed? What have we improved? You think about a eulogy, and it's always about the relationships. It's always about the impact a person had on someone else. And what if we looked at it that way instead of just sort of focusing on all of our accomplishments? It's about not only doing good, but being good. So in conclusion, we play many different roles throughout the day, but when we focus on how to make others successful, we reap the greatest rewards. I certainly believe that you get what you give, and having your team's back is super important. And if you're like Ben Franklin and you ask, what good shall I do this day? I hope you'll consider making other people successful. I'm certainly not the best leader in the world. I certainly make mistakes, and I still got more to learn. But I can tell you I've been blessed with some of the absolute most fantastic friendships, partnerships, bosses, and relationships that one person could ever have. And for that, I believe this is an idea worth spreading. So thank you very much.